articles regarding the Balkan, Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda on the Balkan, and linkage with the Islamic State, basically Caliphate, etc. And also the last speaker is Dr. Baruch Brooks from Bar-Ilan University, as well as General Lapid. They are now working together. It's called Bar-Ilan University, Europa Institute or Europa Center, Institute of the Bar-Ilan University. It's my, as I said, great privilege and honor to present our distinguished guest and speaker today, and allow me to say a few sentences why we are here. The main topic of today's conference is Israel, Serbia security dilemmas and challenges and threats to national security of Israel and Serbia, and basically what we can learn from each other experience, because our guests are huge, they said, huge field experience. So in Israel, it's not like in Serbia. If you want to be professor of security and teach security, you need to have at least 10 years field experience, and then obtaining your academic degree, and then society will recognize you as an expert from the field. What is the common, basically, between Israel and Serbia? It's not only the threats of Al-Qaeda, not the threats of the Islamic State, because this kind of the threat is common to every country today. There is no country in the world that can declare that it's safe because of the threats of the global jihadi movement. But exactly some things that connect us, it's not only the threats. Yesterday we had a conference at the National Parliament of Serbia, and we also underlined that between Serbia and Israel, between Serbian and Jewish people, there is a lot of common things, not only our common past and suffering. As we conclude from the yesterday conference, Serbian and Jews, we are not connected by blood, but we are connected with the spilled blood in the past. So this kind of connection we cannot forgive, and day by day, years by years, we are working to upgrade a relationship between two states, and moreover, relationship between two nations, because there is our people living in diaspora in surrounding countries, as well as the Jewish people living out of Israel, as it is very well known. So I think it is something from my own personal experience. Since 2003, I know these two gentlemen, so it's a long time of our friendship, and later on with General Lapid and Dr. Brooks recently. But how we start basically our friendship? We start to discuss what is the impact and what is the elements of the network of jihadi terrorists in the Balkan, and connection with the global jihad movement. Working also in reference to 9/11, one of the biggest terrorist attack in modern history, we find out that there is a lot of Mujahideen which came basically from Afghanistan. They came to Bosnia through Croatia and other places, and they commit horrible crimes against the non-Muslim population in Bosnia and in Kosovo. And part of our search is also the legacy which came from history, basically, from World War II. Two special units of SS was created in the region of Balkan. One was SS Skanderbeg Division, and another was SS Handjar Division, both created by Himmler, as well as Palestinian Mufti Al-Husseini from Jerusalem. So these units create horrible war crimes against Jews, Serbian, and Roma people in the region of former Yugoslavia. The same units later on, during the conflict of 90s, the same units, almost from the same families, from the same roots, but later on we had two special units one in Kosovo, second in Bosnia. In Kosovo is Abu Bakr Sidik, which hereded basically SS Skanderbeg, and in Bosnia it is El Mujahedin unit, which was followed, actually hereded tradition of SS Handjar Division. So we can see that also there is sociological, history and also security background and relation from the past. And I think our guest speakers here are more, let's say, more knowledgeable, more than any around the world. So without any ado, I would like to give the floor to Colonel Shine, because he wrote down several books on the Balkan, and he can say a few of his comments. Also, you can raise your question after presentation of each, and or we can, on end of this discussion, we can open debate for your questions. And we are very happy, and we are glad that you're going to make this forum more attractive with your question on the end. So, sir, floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Since time is short, so I will make just a few remarks as a kind of introduction, and of course you are invited to ask what you are interested in. Since we live in a global village, the influence between the different parts of the globe are very intensive. And when we speak about the Middle East today, and what is almost a decade-old phenomenon of the so-called Arab Spring, of course the influence of events in the Middle East are reflected as well in the Balkans. So, Darko mentioned before that, let's say, what was considered the most threatening element of the Islam was what we used to call the global jihad and the local version of the global jihad. And they arrived here because of a regional conflict, first to participate on the Muslim side in the war in Bosnia, and later on, to a lesser degree, to participate in the war in Kosovo. What happened later on is that many of these radical Islamists that arrived here and participated in the war remained here. And I think that we can call the decade between the 90s and 2003 and around 2011 as the breeding period of radical Islam in the Balkans. Because what we have seen, mainly since the beginning of the civil war in Syria in 2011 and onwards, but even earlier in Iraq, was that volunteers or mujahideen or foreign fighters, there are different terms to describe them, came from all around the world, from different Muslim countries and communities, but as well from the Balkans. So what is the significance? The significance is that we have here the potential for these volunteers. It means that Muslim population in the Balkans was indoctrinated, and this is the product, or if you want, the fruits of this process. And they left to Syria and Iraq and other places, and now when the war is almost over, they are coming back. Now, if I look at the challenges of the Balkan states, and I relate mainly to the Muslim states in the Balkan, and less to Serbia per se. But Serbia is, of course, will be affected from everything that will happen around. But we have to take in consideration that regarding statistics, the percentage of participants in the jihad in Syria and Iraq that came, for instance, from Kosovo, Bosnia, and Albania is the highest. Not in the nominal numbers, but in the percentage. And the significance is that we have to take in consideration that the region has a double threat. One is from those who remain at home. For different reasons, they failed to join the jihad outside, but they are still around. The situation is that, again, I said that what's going on in the Middle East, we have the reflection in this way. In general terms, the Muslim world is in a kind of transition and competition between three main schools. The first one is the Muslim Brotherhood, that in the Middle East more or less was depressed, but you have to take in consideration that the main sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood is Turkey, and Turkey is a more than significant player in the Balkans. So they will try to promote the school of the Muslim Brotherhood in this region. I'm not going now to the question if the Muslim Brotherhood is more dangerous or less dangerous than the others, but this is the oldest and mostly, let's say, grassroots Islamic movement in the Middle East and around the world. The second, and of course I have to mention, I believe that you know that there are Sunni Muslims. The Sunnah is the majority, it's about 85% of the Muslims in the world, and the Muslim Brotherhood is representing Sunni population. The second class is the class that we mentioned before, the jihadists. And again, it's not a homogeneous movement, there are many different types, but we will relate to them as jihadists. And the third power in the Middle East that we will see in the region as well, let's say that today, after the defeat of the Islamic State, the main competition over the Middle East is between Iran, which is representing the Shia Muslim, against the Sunni Muslims that are represented by a coalition led mainly by Saudi Arabia and Egypt. All these powers, you will meet them here. Here, when I say here, it's mainly in Kosovo, Bosnia, Albania, but as well in Serbia, at least in small regions that you still have Muslim population, I believe that it will be affected as well. So these are the challenges, and I think that in the discussion we will speak as well what should be the regional, local responses to this kind of challenge of the Islam in general, but of course to the more violent or extremist expressions of Islam in your region.
Thank you, Shaul.
Okay, good afternoon. Just to continue some segments of what Shaul was saying, and then I'll pop to another topic. Just bear in mind that the Muslim Brotherhood, as Shaul mentioned, is not just a general perception and ideology. It is led now from Turkey, but also they're very active in Egypt, and the instability in Egypt, of course. I just want to remind you that Hamas, as I'm sure you have heard, this is a stream that was incepted from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in the Gaza Strip. And Hamas is confronting Israel, or they executed suicide attacks and other attacks, but it's not such a generally generic movement which is only Muslim Brotherhood. And by the way, in some Arab countries recently, in the recent years, some branches of the Muslim Brotherhood were designated. They were banned, outlawed in some Gulf states. So this is Hamas. Another important organization which also relates to what Shaul was describing, Iran, and this is Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, although it's a Lebanese Shiite organization concentrated in confronting Israel from the north part, participating in the civil war in Syria, as you know. Now they've come back, most of them. They gained a lot of operational experience in the fight in Syria. But Hezbollah is also, in addition of being a terrorist organization designated by most countries in the world, Hezbollah is being sponsored by a state-sponsoring entity, which is Iran. Iran is backing, Iran is being designated as a state-sponsor terrorism entity. Hezbollah acts internationally, not like Hamas in Gaza or in the West Bank. They have cells and infrastructure in South America, in the US. They executed attacks in the Balkans against Israeli targets, if you remember Burgas. And therefore, they are active in this region of the Balkans as a launching pad, whether to attack local entities that they have decided to attack, or to go outside and they export their attacks externally from this region. So the region of the Balkan is very important for Hezbollah. In addition to what Charles was saying regarding the global jihad or the jihadists, so this is just to add another headache to the homegrown terrorists, to the local terrorists, and the foreign fighters which are coming back. This is another layer. I will refer to additional aspects that has to be taken into consideration, which are shared threats to Serbia, to Israel, and other states. The first one is fundraising or sponsoring of terrorism. The whole story of transferring money, illegal money, through banks, through Hawala, official channels, unofficial channels. The whole story of financing terrorism is a mutual concern for all parties and states, and regulation, and coordination, and sharing information, intelligence regarding money being pulled from one place to another to support illegal activities, and the fundraising and the countering of laundering money and financing terrorism is a hot topic between our states, but also the regional states, including the US and others. The second one is information or sharing information to thwart potential attacks, and this is between the intelligence communities, Israel, Serbia, but also internationally, and this is a pinpoint information of cooperation to apprehend and to thwart potential attackers. Another layer of mutual concern is the phenomenon of radicalization, and the process that people are being undergoing from regular Muslims, Sunni Muslims, into radical and then to jihadists. I'm speaking radicalization mainly about radical Islam. I'm not speaking about radical ideas of the extreme left, or I don't know what other ecologists. We have all kinds of radicals, but I'm speaking about a certain brand of radicalization which is within Islam. Well, mainly it's the Sunni Islam. They're very problematic. We have several layers of problems in the process of radicalization. One is the extreme Wahhabi Saudi ideology, which still was not changed and still exists on websites. This ideology is very much generating self-radicalization or group radicalization based on the ideology of hatred against the West and so on. We don't have time to deal with it. And second is the flow of money through humanitarian charities, as they call it. And those charities are active exactly where the government is not present, including in Serbia, in communities which are segregated, which are closed. The government doesn't want anything with them, and they don't want anything with the government, and they have their own independent, autonomic schooling and madrasas and money, and this infrastructure is very troubling in the process of radicalization, and of course the question of how to counter steps needs to be taken, if at all, regarding countering the radicalization process. I will stop here, and then if you have questions, you are most welcome.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank, on behalf of you, to thank Professor Darko for this wonderful opportunity that he gave us, I mean us, you and us, of the cooperation between the two countries. I asked for a paper, and I thought that Serbia is 6 letters, Serbia. Security, environment, regional affairs, bilateral cooperation, intelligence, and academy. These 6 letters and 6 topics are, from my point of view, the best way to remember this forum as a forum of cooperation between the two countries, and not only the two countries government to government, but the two countries people to people from professional point of view. We are not an NGO that want to cultivate a certain culture of friendship, which is obvious one of the secondary achievements of this forum. But the fact that you listen to the two preface of my colleagues here about our knowledge, about our know-how, about our facility of having very vital, updated information on the area, on international terrorism, on Iran. If I take only these 2 main topics that are in common interest of the world generally, especially Europe, especially Israel and Europe, and of course other parts of the world. What we face now in the world is not only the traditional war systems, the new segment of the confrontation is now in soft warfare. Soft warfare means psychological warfare, communication, the ability to influence the tradition and the concept of people, and afterwards also the policies of government, is now in a new level of the modern countries. What we face now is that we can influence elections, we can influence the result of policies, we can influence the changes of policies against countries. You are in a climate of this region that is in very, very intensive influence of Russia, for instance, and we know it also in our country, in other countries. What does it mean now? Even the word influence is different from what we knew in the past of influence. Therefore, the role of your generation, using social media, using different media than we used to consume in the past, we can also not only to consume but also to produce and to influence by social media different aspects of our life, and the enemies that are now totally different enemies from the past. I brought this ocean of opportunities to our mind, that to see how to cope with terrorism nowadays is in different ways, that we have to be creative without borders. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
There is another challenge which I forgot. We are not in a very formal, and this is the internet. I think this is a challenge which is a very common denominator for all of us. And the internet regarding aspects of, one, moving money, money laundering through internet, Bitcoin, all this challenge. Terrorist organizations started to call for donations through Bitcoin. We have it at least in several examples with Hamas, but it's not the only one. Second is the social media as a vehicle for recruitment, for ideology, for posing ideas, what I call the conveyor belt, like in the suitcases in an airport. You're waiting for the conveyor belt to come and bring you the suitcase. So this is conveying idea from side to side, the ideology. So the whole issue of cyber is, of course, very relevant to Serbia, to Israel, and there is a relationship and partnership regarding cyber terrorism, cyber corruption, and so on. And therefore, I think that lately the Serbian young generation is very much involved in startups, which are involving also Israeli companies, and I think this is a very good development.
Good afternoon. The common denominator that one may draw between Israel and Serbia can be based in taking test cases. If I relate to the 90s, we can see that some elements of jihad used an unstable government or unstable situations to penetrate the area, to join local populations, and because they came from an external environment such as Afghanistan, they do not care about the area or its prosperity, and thus they want to deteriorate the situation. This was 30 years ago, but if we relate to concurrent times, as similar jihadists from Afghanistan in Syria, for instance, we can see that although some of the persons may change, some of the techniques and some of the religious beliefs stay the same. And if we measure these techniques, if we document them, if we relate to history and databases, and add technology as statistics or special computers to document texts, we can find common denominators, we can deduct conclusions, and we can arrive at some know-how on how to deal with these phenomena. Because although the environment might change and some nations may change, the human nature stays the same. Technology advances, but the behavior, sociology, and psychology of human beings stay the same throughout millenniums. Another thing, we can draw a parallel from how come a government is effective and how come an effective government deals with elements that want to deteriorate situation. We can see how, if we relate to Muslim terrorism, we can see who wants to live in peace, who considers himself as a part of an area he lives in, and whom are the elements of jihad that want to abuse the situation. We can see documentation of governments, how do they behave towards these elements by joining moderate elements in the population, mostly indigenous, which means a population that evolved from the state and did not come to the state from an external other area, and see how they can join local leadership, local religious leadership. Find if there are religious, if we talk about Islam, religious moderates and religious persons that came and evolved from the state that do not want to participate in these things. And they may join the government in combating these externals and these militia persons or jihadists. Thank you.
Since he was engage in a very interesting search of lonely wolf operation. So if you can say a few things to our students, what is a lone wolf? Is it really a lone wolf, or is it network behind, etc.?
Generally speaking, the phenomenon which is called lone wolf, which I don't agree to this determination, because I just open a parenthesis, wolves do not live alone, so there is no lone wolf. And I will call it the lone perpetrator. Is alone perpetrating an attack. Now the question is he doing it really without any connections to anyone? He woke up in the morning, decided to perpetrate an attack. He stripped himself once it was a suicide belt. Today just take a vehicle and runs into the public, or takes a knife and hits as much as he can until he will be shot or captured. The main question of all those is, first of all, is he alone, totally alone? In many cases of investigations, in the cases in Israel, we had a wave of attacks in 2015, October, November, but there were also attacks in Europe. The investigation showed that in many cases it is not the case. I mean, the perpetrator is connected to someone. He was sharing someone. Even he was sharing on the internet, but still it's a virtual community. But he was connected to someone. In some cases, the perpetrator himself, before the attack, was in touch with one or two or three, because I speak generally. If you understand the radical Islam mindset, including Al-Qaeda perpetrators and even Jihad, ISIS perpetrators, in Islam you don't have the notion of individualism. There's nothing which is called, I'm alone, I live alone in the world, I have no connection to no one. Always there is a connection. Especially these newly ideologized, radicalized, always they have someone behind. It doesn't mean that the operation was not initiated by him and conducted by him as a lone perpetrator, but there are always connections backwards. And this is from the investigations of security forces, whether it is in Brussels, whether it is in France, whether it is in other places. And in many cases, it was the case in Israel. Now, regarding the last wave of lone perpetrators in Israel, mainly with stabbing with knives, run over crowd with cars, one or two shooting attacks, we have conducted interviews with those that survived the attacks, with the institute that I belong to. And there were two teams which were the intelligence psychology aspects, understanding the mindset of the perpetrator, and the other ones were psychologists, to understand what is behind in the mindset. And together we try to formulate a profile. And I'm sure that you're not surprised to hear that we cannot identify a significant or typical profile in order to prevent the phenomenon. You see youngsters, you see more elder people, you see married people, you see unmarried people, you see divorced women, you see undivorced, you see all types of people that had their own motivational factors which were ignited by the events surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At that time it was in Jerusalem. So there was an igniting aspect, but they were carrying tons of problems, psychological problems. More than 90% of the women which participated in lone perpetrator attacks in Israel, more than 95% of them did it for emotional disturbance and emotional background, whether they were being abused by their husbands, whether they were raped in the family. Yes, there were cases of rape, including internal family rape. I interviewed 2 of them, which said, this is the story of my life. And I had no escape, I wanted to die. And the only way to get out from this vicious circle in my life is to take a knife and try to stab an Israeli or a soldier or whatever, hopefully that I will die. So a high percentage of those lone perpetrators they have also the mindset that they want to die. They want to become a shaheed on one place from the religious point of view, but also to solve their problem, their personal problem, hopefully that they will be killed. So they will be legitimized by the society, but this will also end their suffering. So to understand the phenomenon of these people, each case by case, try to drive any common denominator, and then to have conclusions, how can you confront it operationally? Very difficult. There are some operational aspects, but this is not the forum to go into it. But generally, I think that there is not a clear-cut antidote to a problem. It's not like you are ill, you take a pill, and after 24 hours, everything is fine. You need to find every time a new formulation to deal, because it's impossible to inoculate in advance for this phenomenon. Thank you.
Let's take the cyber medium as one of the very effective fields now to cope with terrorism. And let's take the Israeli experience in this field. We have 3 missions of cyber from intelligence point of view. One is collection. We are, like many other intelligence services, in the challenge of coping with big data. The numbers that we can say today is that we collect every day in Israel more than 10 million pieces of information that we have to check. When I say to check, of course, not with eyes and not with ears, by different ways, and to come from this 9 to 10 million pieces to 80 pieces, which are, from our point of view, the effective pieces of information that are relevant. So you see, first of all, in this ocean of information, the big data, which is known as a challenge in the intelligence world. The second mission is what we call passive cyber. Passive cyber is all the ways that we have to defend and to open eyes to different enemies of cyber. And the third is the offensive cyber. Offensive cyber is the trend that is very well known now also in the world. You can, we all saw the big operation of the Americans now to check the involvement of the elections there. We knew also about other trials of influence by social media and other cyber ways to influence. So this is the offensive. So collection, passive and active offensive cyber in three ways of using cyber as the most effective source of information to cope with terrorism. Not only the lone wolf that was mentioned before, but also in many other different. Even our experience in the last years in Syria, we saw hundreds of very small organizations that were in the civil war in Syria, that the only way to cover it effectively was by social media and cyber.
Yes, I agree. So now it's time for your questions. So, is there any? Floor is open. Please raise your hand and make a question. This is a unique chance for you to ask high professional.
One by one, not all of them together.
Please.
Thank you. A question for all the
If you
professors.
can introduce yourself, please.
Oh, thank you. Nicholas Scholars, student here at American University. So, question would be for all the professors. What would be your opinion on the immigration crisis in Europe? Since a lot of immigrants were led without a single paper to Europe, could it be a potential way of infiltrating lots of sleepers in Europe who would be able to commit multiple crimes and terrorist attacks? And unannounced since they don't have papers and are illegally in European Union.
I think that it's a tough question because we have to relate to it from different aspects. So first of all, it's a humanitarian question. And of course we don't have statistics, but I believe that the majority of the refugees or the immigrants are innocent people who are trying to save their life and to have better life in Europe than in their own countries. But we have to take in consideration two other aspects. One of them is demographic, and again, the time will be short to discuss it because it's a major question that relates to long-term consequences for many countries. I mean, what will be the future of a country like Belgium that within a decade can be with 20% of Muslim immigrants in the heart of Europe. But again, this is not our issue today to discuss. I would like to relate to the question of immigration and terrorism. I think that there is a big problem for most of the European countries that belong to the EU and has to relate to the rules of the EU regarding the question of immigration. And we can see that different countries start to act against the conventional agreements of the EU, such as Hungary, for instance. What is the problem? The problem is, and it's not a speculation, ISIS said it very clearly that they are using the mass immigration from the Middle East to Europe for the infiltration of terrorists that belong to the Islamic State in order to build within the territory of the EU a terror network that they can use for the continuation of the jihad. And it's not limited to one or another country, it's a general threat, I mean, to all the countries that the immigration is going through or that they are the final place that these immigrants will stay. Now, the problem is that it doesn't relate only to the question of the immigration. It's a basic question of democracy and counterterrorism. Because in order to be efficient in the war against terror, unfortunately I say, we have to compromise sometimes with the democratic values. Otherwise, the alternative is that you will be very vulnerable to those who try to use the democracy in order to target the host countries. And I think that we can see all around the European continent different approaches to the question. But at least there are several points that I would like to highlight. First of all, it's necessary to try to collect intelligence and to share it. And when I say share it effectively, that let's say in the optimal situation when the immigrant is coming to, let's say the main entrance are in Greece or in Italy or maybe in one of the other Balkan states, with one touch of the computer, the relevant database about the potential immigrant will be on the screen. Of course, it's a kind of dream so far, but this is the direction that it's necessary to go in order to try to reduce the potential of infiltration of terrorists. The second issue is the legal one. I mean, it's necessary to make the correct laws that will permit the country to refuse the entrance of those who are suspected, even if you don't have the whole proofs that are relevant to the court. Because in many cases we have the very reliable intelligence that a guy is a terrorist, but without endangering the sources of the information, we cannot provide it to the court. And then in the court, he will be released, and later on, we will have to deal with such a challenge. So these are 2 points regarding the ways to deal with the problem. And of course, as I mentioned before, the problem is not just with the immigrants. Unfortunately, the problem is within the Muslim communities that already exist. And at least it's necessary to prevent from extending these communities with, let's say, radical elements that can endanger the stability of the countries in the long term.
Yes. There are a few levels that we can relate to this. First of all, on the long term, there are general bodies throughout the world, as the UN, the World Bank, or other things that should take responsibility and take care of dysfunctional states, as in Africa. Which means if they know that there is a state that is dissolving, they should send the people, loan the money, approach the local leadership so the state will take care of itself, and thus there will not be a problem of refugees from this state. This is a long-term process that can take years, but it's best to start this process in advance. This is for the long term. Right now, as it is, as we have a problem of, first of all, jihadists and there are immigrants. We should identify the areas and relate to them as using the technologies and the information to catalog these persons. If we see the dangers and the bad situation that these refugees are living in, we should let them enter areas which are not the heart of the country. Which means if we take North Africa, I will take an example of two cities in Morocco which are Spain, Ceuta and Melilla. These two cities are Spanish enclaves in Africa. And these cities are encountering waves of refugees and immigrants because they do not have to cross the ocean. And once they enter these enclaves, they are considered as part of the European Union. So, as my colleague said, there are cases of misery. And we as human beings can relate to them. But in a constant manner, there are cases of persons or groups that use these miseries in order to hurt the states that they want to infiltrate. If we use other data as organizations, known terrorist organizations throughout the world, we can combine these abilities and relate to all of these problems altogether. The situation is not clear, and my answers, I know, are not clear-cut. But our world is so complicated, and sometimes black and white coexist together, and we have to deal with that.
More questions than comment, no answers. Because the stable is open, the horses run away, and now somebody is trying to manage the situation. Nobody made any long-term analysis that refugees will come. Most of the refugees are, as mentioned, in Africa and the war in Syria, or in that part of the world. Nobody prepared himself regarding policy, what to do if it happens. It started the way it started, and nobody gave answers to the evolving reality. Now I have a question. First of all, refugees will go to rich parts of the world, not to poor parts of the world. In North Africa, it's a special case because they are embedded in the EU, but that's it, because of the political situation there, or the legalistic. People are immigrating generally from poor to rich. Nobody from Syria will go to Somalia. Where they go? To the rich West. I'm asking the question, why this rich West, which has an organized EU and institutions and mechanisms and so on, did not organize themselves from the beginning of the wave and say, sorry, not here. All the waves to Saudi Arabia, to Kuwait, to Bahrain, they speak the same language, it's the same mentality. There's no demographic crisis in the West, there is no demographic or less demographic in the Gulf countries. Let's make a special effort, martial effort, with planes, with ships, with everything, and let's relocate them in an organized manner, with money, with jobs, whatever, in the Gulf states. So the problem is EU. Why EU? Because they are perceived as idiots. They are being perceived by the Arab world and by others as they are democratic. So they will not oppose, they will not make any problems. Who will oppose in Germany, in Italy, in other places? Only the extreme right wing. So this created a populism wave, in addition to other reasons, a populism wave, a right-wing extreme wave, and so on, because politicians were reluctant to take a multilateral decision. Not only Orban in Hungary as to be the bad guy and to accept a common denominator between the EU states, absorb some refugees in a considerable manner but still manageable. So from the humanitarian point of view, you absorb and you take refugees, and then portions will go to the Gulf countries. So this kind of strategy was not constructed, and therefore we are now standing in front of this crisis.
More questions? Please.
First of all, thank you for this great lecture and that you came into our house. My name is Nicola, I'm a lecturer at law, and I have one easy question that is interesting for everyone in this room, I suppose. So, what is your vision of resolving the Kosovo issue? That is very interesting. What is the best for the Serbian side, and how the potential solution will reflect to stability and peace in the region?
Okay, I mentioned effective governments. An effective government rules. And when an effective government rules, then insurgents and groups that want to rebel do not rebel. An effective rule has the ability to approach the communities, and if we relate to Muslim communities, then it recognizes the leaders. In Muslim societies, we have muhtars and leaders and religious preachers that once they acknowledge the necessity to obey the country and be a positive part of the country, they can work with the government to resolve situations. And they will be the ones to identify foreigners that enter the country and want to cause trouble. If this process is an effective process, then peace and prosperity will evolve.
I think that the Kosovo question, of course, for Serbians, is not just a political or rational question, but emotional as well. And the same can be said about the other side of the Muslims or Albans in Kosovo. And it has a long history, including some bloody periods. So, on one hand, I think that to compromise, and I try to make the analogy to our problems, will not be simple. And I know that negotiations are going on almost for a year in Brussels with, let's say, limited success because of the complexity of the question. But what I can say, of course, it's up to the leaders of the countries how to solve it. Anyway, one important principle should be that both communities will maintain its autonomy. In this case, because the Serbians are just a small minority after the Kosovo War, it's necessary to guarantee the independence, or not formal independence, but at least autonomy of the Serbs in Kosovo. This is one part, of course, with all the guarantees to the safety and the security of Serbian facilities that will remain in the Kosovo as dominated by the Albans. The second point is that I'm afraid that in this type of conflicts, the presence of international forces is necessary. So if there are some ideas in NATO and the EU that it's time after more than a decade to KFOR is not necessary, no, I think that unfortunately, it's necessary to maintain peacekeeping forces there for long, is to manage the crisis and to live with the existing crisis, to try to eliminate violence, and not to do things that will prevent in the future achieving a potential union.
I know that time is over and there is another classes. So I would like to thank our guests and thank you for attending and hope to see you soon. Thank you all.